For decades, one company has been obsessed with building aircraft that were never supposed to be seen. Aircraft designed to disappear from enemy radar. Aircraft capable of penetrating some of the most heavily defended airspace on Earth. And aircraft that pushed the boundaries of what military aviation could achieve. That company was Northrop Grumman. But now the company is facing its biggest challenge yet. Because the B-21 Raider isn't just another bomber. It could determine the future of American air power. And for Northrop Grumman, it could define the company's place in military aviation for decades. But here's the problem. The B-21 has to succeed, where one of the most advanced aircraft ever built, the B-2 Spirit, left behind a difficult legacy. So why is Northrop Grumman betting so heavily on the Raider? The answer begins with the aircraft that came before it. When the B-2 Spirit entered service, it looked like nothing else in the sky. Its enormous fly-wing design was revolutionary, but its real advantage was something you couldn't see: stealth. The B-2 was designed to penetrate enemy airspace while remaining difficult to detect. It became one of the most technologically advanced bombers ever built. But there was a problem. The B-2 was incredibly expensive. Only a limited number were produced. And as the years passed, maintaining such a small fleet became increasingly difficult. The B-2 proved that America could build a stealth bomber. But the next challenge was even harder. Could America build a new stealth bomber and produce enough of them to matter? And that was the challenge Northrop Grumman accepted. The world that created the B-2 no longer existed. America's potential adversaries were developing increasingly sophisticated military systems, advanced radar networks, long-range missiles, integrated air defenses, electronic warfare, and increasingly powerful sensors. The future battlefield could be filled with systems designed specifically to detect and destroy aircraft attempting to enter contested airspace. The next bomber couldn't simply be another B-2. It had to be designed for a new era of warfare. It needed to penetrate sophisticated defenses, operate over enormous distances, carry conventional and nuclear weapons, and remain relevant against threats that might not even exist today. And that was the mission. And in 2015, Northrop Grumman won the competition to build America's next stealth bomber. The B-21 Raider was born. The B-21 wasn't designed to replace just one aircraft. It was expected to gradually replace the B-1B Lancer and B-2 Spirit while becoming a central part of America's future bomber force. The Air Force had planned for a fleet of at least 100 aircraft, and that changes everything. The B-2 was a technological masterpiece, built in limited numbers. The B-21 has to be different, it has to be advanced, but also producible. It has to be stealthy, but also maintainable. And it has to remain useful for decades. This is where Northrop Grumman faces its greatest challenge. Because building one revolutionary aircraft is difficult, building an entire fleet of them is something else entirely. And Northrop Grumman knows exactly what happens when advanced aircraft become too difficult or expensive to produce. The B-21 cannot repeat the history of the B-2. It has to deliver the technology without becoming trapped by the cost and complexity. That is the gamble. For years, the B-21 existed almost entirely in secrecy. The public knew the program existed, but almost everything important remained classified. Then in December 2022, Northrop Grumman finally revealed the aircraft, and the world got its first look. B-21 clearly carried the DNA of the B-2. The flying wing was still there, but this was a new generation. And the most important technologies couldn't be seen. Its sensors, its communications, its electronic warfare capabilities, its software, and its true ability to operate inside a modern battle space. Those details remain largely classified. And perhaps that's the greatest advantage of all. Because the less an enemy knows about the B-21, the harder it becomes to prepare for it. The aircraft's greatest weapon may be the uncertainty surrounding it. On November 10, 2023, The B-21 Raider took to the sky for the first time. After years of secrecy, the aircraft was finally flying. For Northrop Grumman, this was a major milestone. But it was not the end. It was the beginning. Because the B-21 now had to prove that it could move from a highly classified development program to an operational fleet. And that meant testing. Testing its flight characteristics, testing its systems, testing its software, finding problems, fixing them, and preparing the aircraft for production. But Northrop Grumman had another challenge. It couldn't just build a few B-21s. It had to build a fleet. And that meant learning from the B-2. The B-2 showed the world what stealth technology could achieve. But it also demonstrated the dangers of building an aircraft that was too complex and too expensive to produce in large numbers. The B-21 was designed with different philosophy. Northrop Grumman and the Air Force emphasized digital engineering and production representative processes. The goal was to make the transition from development to production more efficient, because the B-21 isn't supposed to be a technological experiment. It is supposed to become a major part of America's military strategy, and that requires numbers. A handful of aircraft can perform missions, but a large fleet can shape an entire war. That's why production may ultimately be just as important as stealth. Northrop Grumman has to prove that it can build a Raider fast enough and affordably enough to give the United States the fleet it needs. But even if Northrop Grumman succeeds in building the B-21, there is another enemy waiting: time. Because the aircraft entering service today could still be flying decades from now, and the battlefield of the future could look completely different, new radar systems will appear, new missiles will be developed, artificial intelligence will transform warfare, electronic warfare will become more sophisticated, and America's adversaries will constantly search for ways to defeat stealth aircraft. The B-21 therefore has to do something extraordinary. It has to evolve. That's why its digital systems and architecture may be just as important as its physical design. The aircraft must be capable of receiving new technologies and adapting to changing threats. Because the greatest danger isn't necessarily what an enemy can do today. It's what they might be able to do 20 years from now. And the B-21 has to be ready. This is why the B-21 matters so much to Northrop Grumman. The company isn't simply designing another aircraft. It is investing an entire industrial ecosystem. Factories, digital engineering, specialized manufacturing, supply chain, skilled workers, and decades of future support. The B-21 program represents a massive long-term commitment, and if it succeeds, the reward could be enormous. Northrop Grumman could remain at the center of American strategic aviation for generations. The company that built the B-2 could become the company that defines America's next era of stealth bombing. But failure would be equally significant. Delays, cost increases, production problems, or technological limitations could threaten the entire vision. And the pressure will only increase as America's adversaries develop new ways to detect and defeat stealth aircraft. The B-21 isn't fighting a single enemy. It is fighting an entire future of technological change. So, did Northrop Grumman really bet everything on the B-21 Raider? Not literally, but strategically, the answer is much closer to yes. The B-21 represents the continuation of Northrop Grumman's greatest legacy: the flying wing, the B-2, stealth. And now, the future of long-range strike. If the Raider succeeds, it could become one of the defining aircraft of the 21st century. It could replace an aging generation of bombers. It could provide America with a new way to penetrate heavily defended airspace, and it could remain a critical part of American military power for decades. But if the battlefield changes faster than the B-21 can adapt, the aircraft could eventually face the same problem that has challenged every revolutionary military machine: obsolescence. And that's the ultimate gamble. Northrop Grumman isn't just trying to build the next great bomber, it is trying to build a bomber that can survive the future. Because the B-21 won't be judged by what it can do today. It will be judged by whether it can still dominate the battlefield decades from now. For now, the Raider remains one of the most closely watched military aircraft on Earth. Its most important capabilities remain classified. The fleet has to be fully built, and its greatest missions still lie ahead. But one thing is already clear. Northrop Grumman didn't just design the successor to the B-2. It designed a bet on the future of air power. And now the world is waiting to see whether that bet pays off. Because if the B-21 succeeds, Northrop Grumman may have secured its place at the center of American strategic aviation for another generation. But if it fails, the consequences could be remembered for decades. The B-21 Raider isn't just America's next stealth bomber. It is Northrop Grumman's biggest gamble yet. And the real question is no longer whether the Raider can fly, it really does. The real question is, can it survive the future?